So, the looter shooter. It is a fascinating game genre, one that I also think is at a very interesting point in its history. So today I want to dive into where we are at with looter shooters on today's market, as well as where I see them going next. Fair warning, if you've not visited the channel before, this is a The Division focused page, meaning there's going to be a good bit of Division 3 talk in this, as it is my most anticipated, well, anything really at this point. But I also want to extend the scope beyond just The Division, most notably with the huge news recently that Destiny would be shuttering its doors, announcing end of service for Destiny 2 last month. Destiny was the game that got me into this genre to begin with. Destiny 1 was the first looter I'd ever played back on the Xbox One, and so when it comes to looters, the vibes have just been weird lately between hope, grief, uncertainty. So I want to ramble about it all a bit. I would love to know all of your thoughts by the end of this, but yeah, let's go. What's fascinating to me about the looter shooter is that even though it is a genre that I think is fairly recognizable by name to a lot of gamers out there, it doesn't have nearly as many standout franchises or games within it as other genres do, right? Take fighting games, for example. So many I could list off, but Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Smash Bros. Come to mind. Or racing games, again, so many. Forza, Need for Speed, Mario Kart. Or if I were to talk about RPGs, I mean, that list would just be endless. Now, part of this is due to age, right? The looter shooter is a relatively newer concept and genre. Now, it had its inspirations in earlier iterations, no doubt. Diablo is one that absolutely comes to mind, obviously without much of the shooting aspect of things. But if you're talking about the main tentpole looter shooters out there, to me, the four that come to mind are Borderlands, Warframe, The Division, and Destiny. You can let me know if you agree with that list or think I'm leaving anything out. Again, that's not to say that no other looters exist, but if you're talking about the big hitters that have had genuine impact and fame within the genre, those are the ones that stand out to me. So where are those franchises today? Well, for Borderlands, and for the record, I've never actually played any one of its games. Someday I should, but they just released Borderlands 4 last year. As best I can tell, it got mixed opinions, at least that is its review score on Steam. Borderlands, I feel, has always been slightly different from the others here. It has had multiple sequels. It's less prone to following the live service model, if you will, of seasons, frequent events, all of that. Then you have Warframe, which seems like it will never slow down. It continues to appeal to new players. It holds a very dedicated core audience, frequently pushes out new content. I also have to give a shout to their software engineers. Warframe is older than both Destiny and The Division 1. I have no idea how they keep it running as well as it does in spite of all that has been added over the years. Tech debt and needed restarts is a topic that we will come back to, but again, they've avoided that miraculously. But then you get to the two that I think share the most similarities, and it's the two that I'll be spending the most amount of time comparing in this video. For The Division, as regular viewers of the channel would know, Division 2 is in its 8th year of post-launch content. They're currently working on shipping a new DLC. They're developing a full-on extraction mode, modeled off of one that was back in The Division 1. But, as mentioned in the intro, all of this is really just holdover and slowly leading toward The Division 3, which is in active development. And then finally, you of course have Destiny, which I would say popularized and really mainstreamed the looter genre back in the 2010s. Unfortunately, though, as I mentioned, this just recently was put on ice, basically, with Destiny 2 putting an end to its roadmap and there being no current confirmed plans for future content or games. And that's left the state of this genre in just a very weird place, in my opinion. Again, in part because there is just such a limited offering of mainstream looters, and arguably the most popular and well-known one just blipped away like that. And look, I'm sure Borderlands will keep doing its stuff. They're probably quietly working on a 5th installment that we'll see in a couple of years. Warframe will absolutely keep doing its thing. It's too successful not to. I almost see that game in a realm of its own, though, where they just keep doing their thing to please their players, and it works for them. Maybe what strikes me so much as a Division player about Destiny going away is that the two games really do have a lot of things in common, right? DLC release structure, co-op in-game content like raids and dungeons or incursions in The Division, new gear, exotics that come out frequently, the whole works. And complete tangent, but don't even get me started on the weird number of coincidences that Destiny and The Division have had over the years. I've wanted to make a video video on that subject so many times, but ultimately it just felt a little too niche. But hear me out, both games can be abbreviated to D1, D2. The franchises released their sequels exactly 3 years apart from the first game. Both lost their PvP teams about 1 year into the second game for them to go work on spin-off and incubation projects. Both share mobile ports with similarly defined subtitles, both starting with R. I'm telling you, there's a weird number of coincidences between the two, but I digress. What's funny is that prior to the end of service announcement for Destiny 2 and the layoffs that occurred at Bungie afterwards, whenever I would jump in and listen to Destiny conversations, I heard very similar requests and hopes for the future as I do in the Division space. Now, on the surface, that boils down to a lot of active Destiny 2 players saying, we need a new game. It's time for Destiny 3. Now, I know not everybody out there wants the 3 for whichever franchise. They'd rather stick with one game forever. At a certain point, though, I'm of the opinion that you have to move on, have a new iteration. Tech debt is one big reason why. We mentioned that earlier. I know any of you out there who are Division or Destiny players, you are no stranger to bugs, and this is not to say that a third game in either franchise would eliminate bugs completely, in no way, but the older a game gets, the more you add on top of it, the more prone bugs are going to become, sometimes in completely weird corners of the game that the devs aren't even touching. Also, older games make it a lot harder to implement ambitious new systems. Crossplay is a great example for the Division 2 right now. It sounds like it's fairly easy to make this a thing if you're developing a game from scratch. Turns out it's a lot harder to retroactively add it for a 7-year-old game. Also, you then have the concept of a gear refresh or just a progression reset with a new title. Because as much as I know that people don't want to lose their stuff that they worked on getting for all these years, you can't ignore that it is hard to retain interest as well as keep a balance and not lean into power creep on the devs end for these years and years that these games go on. I mean, just in the past 12 months alone, you saw tiered gear added in Destiny, prototype gear in the Division 2. These were both attempts to add a meaningful pursuit back to the gear grind, and yet a sentiment that I saw from a lot of people about both was, why not save these ideas for the sequel, for the third game? And finally, there just comes to a point where these types of games can become rather formulaic, right? You establish a certain seasonal model, the players then know what to expect, they know what beats are coming with each update, and that's not necessarily an inherent fault of the game or something that needs to be corrected. But yeah, if you stick with one thing forever, you're likely going to keep doing what you know works. And so for all of those reasons and more, when I hear people talking about the desire for a Destiny 3, a lot of those conversations center around a desire to return to the mystery and wonder that the world of Destiny can offer. And again, similarly on the Division side, I know a lot of people, when it comes to the Division 3, they really want the surprise factor to come back. They want exploration to matter again, to go out and search all of these vast cities and areas for secrets. Now, one thing that gives me hope in that regard is from the limited official comments that we have on the Division 3. Back at the end of last year, you had Julian Garrity, who is the former executive producer for the Division. From what we know, he was heavily involved with the Division 3. He gave the following quote here about how progress is going on the third title.
Within these walls in Massive, we are working extremely hard on something that I think will be as big an impact as Division 1 was.
And why that's inspiring, at least to me, is that I think both the Division and Destiny players could agree for their respective franchises that the first games were simply more iconic. Now, part of that just comes with the territory, right? Any popular franchise is likely going to have a lot of fanfare for the initial entry, and I also think part of it was just a product of the eras in which they released it. Back in 2014, 2015, 2016, we had the internet, of course. I mean, things were relatively similar to how they are now, but I would also say there was far less of this monolithic culture in terms of game information. You had YouTube, you had guides, you had forums for people to discuss things, but it didn't seem quite so instant. I mean, nowadays, if there's a surprise included in a Destiny update, in a Division 2 update, 5 minutes later, that is going to be all over social media, all over TikTok. And so again, in many ways, it does feel like that sense of surprise, that sense of wonder was lost with these first games. And I don't know if the Division 3 is going to be able to bring that back. I mean, there was no turning back the clock on society, but perhaps there are ways to better bake that into the core game design, ways to incentivize and invoke a need for exploration. That said, said, while I do have big hopes for the Division 3, I also hope that they don't go in and change things just for the sake of change. Rather, I hope that the team takes the learnings from this franchise so far and genuinely innovates on the formula, right? The Division 2 is a very derivative game, as I think Destiny 2 was as well. 3 years, or just short of that, which is the development cycle that both games had, just isn't long enough really to enact the kind of change that I think a lot of us players want. And so in light of that, and looping back to looters at large, I do think that the Division 3 could be a big one. Of course, alongside something like Warframe, which continues to be experimental among others, but there's just something magical about that new game drop. Right? I mean, of course, there's the technical side of it. The Division 3 is going to be able to take advantage of new technologies, system possibilities that just weren't there for the Division 2 or Destiny 2 back in the day. But it's also that moment where people who have dropped out over the years, who maybe see what the Division 2 has done in the meantime and said, well, that looks cool, but if I come back, then I have to learn everything. I have to pick up where I left off. Many people are just going to wait for that next reset, that next opportunity to be at an even playing field with everybody else. And so we talked about how the looter genre has a relatively limited cast of franchises. One of my big hopes with the Division 3 is that it could be that thing to give this genre its next big push, its next big evolution, because while of course I would love the Division to last forever and it's the franchise that I care the most deeply about, there are absolutely other ideas and other corners of this genre that could be explored by other titles. Competition is a good thing. It brings the best out of each other. And one thing that I would love to see is more truly creative and artistic endeavors within the looter genre. I'm sorry to any First Descendant fans out there, but that game, along with many others that try to come along in this space, just feel generic if I had to put a word on it. And so look, I could go on all day, but ultimately I am stoked that the Division 3 is happening. I am also simultaneously heartbroken for any Destiny fans out there that a Destiny 3 is at least not currently seeming to happen. That said, as we all know, it is a very volatile market right now and climate within the gaming industry. It's part of why I think it is such a miracle that the Division 3 is happening at all. And so, at the end of the day, we will see what we get from that, and we'll see where it takes the looter shooter genre moving forward. So, there you have it, folks. Those are some of my thoughts on the current state of the looter shooter genre, my current thoughts on the projects being developed within it, like the Division 3, but also the impact that the lack of an ongoing Destiny project I think will have. So, you've listened to me ramble. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on any and everything that we talked about today. Yeah, what are your biggest hopes for the Division 3 and any other new entries within this genre? Before we close out, as always, have to give a major shout out and thank you to all of our channel members. Thank you so much for your continuous support to myself, my work. It is such a joy to be able to create videos like these. But yeah, that's everything I've got for today, folks. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you back soon. RogueGold. Ow. Oh! We just got a Ravenous! Haha! I might not be friendly. Let's go.
Coming to the Division 2.
Let's go!
And